Welcome to the Financial Crime and Cybersecurity webinar organized by the Department for International Trade teams in Portugal, Greece, Poland, Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary and Romania. During this session, we will hear from our keynote speaker, Ian Glover, President of Crest, and representatives from UK companies about what organizations need to know to prevent cyber threats and attacks. It is now our pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's session, Daniel Patfield, Head of Program, Cyber and National Security at Tech UK. Daniel, welcome and over to you.
Thanks, Sophia, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's event. Certainly a great morning for the English contingent, I'm sure, after last night's football, but even if it does feel a little earlier than a 10 AM start today. Don't worry though, we won't dwell on the football. As Sophia said, I'm Dan Patefield and I lead the cybersecurity programme at Tech UK, which is the national trade association for all things technology and digital here in the UK. It's my job this morning to guide us through a session focusing on financial crime and cybersecurity, and I see that in the event brief you've all been given, we've credited PwC with a version of an oft-quoted line highlighting how there are two types of financial services firms, those that have faced a cyber attack and those that will. And I think clearly it's fair to say that you can broaden that out to all sectors, but clearly there's some specific challenges that financial services face. And what we've seen throughout the pandemic is perhaps an acceleration of the evolution of the cyber threat, and we've seen cyber criminals taking advantage of the consequences of the pandemic, such as moves to home working and other things, to force an uptick in their activity and the effects it's had on the sector, both here in the UK but across Europe as well. I'd like to congratulate colleagues in the Department for International Trade for putting together a great lineup of leading edge, innovative UK cybersecurity companies who are going to talk to us across a wide range of topics today, from AI-driven cyber threats to supply chain security and ransomware, to name just a few. Now, it is a packed agenda, but there will be an opportunity to pose questions after all the speakers have spoken. We'll save those questions for sessions at the end, so each speaker will speak and then we'll move into a Q&A session. And I think it's always the case that your questions are much better than mine on these events, so please do use the chat function throughout to pose those questions and we'll get through as many of them as we can. Now, that's enough from me, I think, and I'm delighted to welcome our keynote speaker for this morning, Ian Glover, President of Crest, an organisation I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Ian's going to set the scene for us for this morning's session, and I'm sure discuss not just those significant challenges that the financial services sector faces in terms of cyber threats, but also the opportunities we have as a sector to strengthen resilience and take the next steps on that cybersecurity journey. So over to you, Ian.
Crest is a not-for-profit organisation that started in the UK, but now is very much an international organisation. Our primary objective is to build capacity, capability and consistency within the technical cybersecurity community, and we do that through a number of different activities. We provide accreditation services of technical suppliers, providing services in vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, cybersecurity incident response, threat intelligence, simulated targeted attack and response, and security operations services. We have gradually extended the areas of accreditation, but the whole idea behind that is to provide access to the buying community of trusted organisations. So very much working on behalf of the buying community to ensure that the organisations that they procure services from are fit for purpose and provide quality services. We also tie that together with professional qualifications. We run what we would class as being a whole set of professional career development examinations. Crest doesn't provide training, we simply provide the certification services. We currently provide 3 levels of examinations. We come in at our practitioner level, which is around about 1,800 hours worth of relevant and frequent experience. We don't measure that, but that's typically what we see as a requirement for individuals passing that particular level of examinations. We then move to our registered level, which is about 6,000 hours, so about three years worth of regular and frequent experience, moving to our certified level, which is about 10,000 hours for five years plus. In addition to that, we also re-examine everybody every 3 years to ensure that their skill, knowledge and competence is still fit for purpose. So very much what we're trying to do there is, again, working on behalf of the buying community, is to provide that access to a trusted organisation who utilise skilled, knowledgeable and competent individuals. And it's those elements tied together which we believe is a real strength in terms of providing these services. We have now more than 250 accredited member organisations across the world in a number of those disciplines. It's very interesting that we probably provide the hardest invitation to tender that anybody would have ever have to answer. And also we combine that with reviews of their policies, processes and procedures, technical reviews, on-site visits and a number of other activities to validate that the organisation is fit for purpose. We have over 3,500 individuals that hold our CREST qualifications, and they hold those qualifications now in 50 countries. So very much what we're now doing is moving towards having, I think, a much greater influence. Again, what I've said is that we also provide other areas. So we provide knowledge sharing. So there is a huge amount of information that's available, and also we point to training organisations. Some of those are represented on this call today, and also we provide a huge amount of professional development activity for individuals. For example, we ran a conference yesterday. We had 3 streams running. All of that information will be recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel free of charge and IPR free. So what we're trying to do is, again, look at how we can build capacity, both in terms of the individual companies, build the capabilities out for the individuals in a way that we can measure, and consistency within the marketplace by providing professional development opportunities. We also combine those things together in terms of the accreditation and the qualifications in terms of supporting a number of regulator operated schemes. One of the most well-known one is something called CBEST, which we helped develop in collaboration with the Bank of England, which is the PRA. And that is very much looking at the critical national infrastructure aspects associated with financial services in the UK. The Bank of England identified 38 major systemic risk areas, those things that if they failed would cause a significant problem to the financial services of the whole of the UK. And the difficulty that they experienced was it was very difficult for them to understand how we could do testing in that type of live operational environment, particularly given the level of impact that could occur should those tests go wrong. So we work very collaboratively with the industry and also with the regulators to develop something we call CBEST, as I've described, which is intelligence-led penetration testing. So highly skilled, highly qualified individuals conducting services of critical operational systems in financial service in live environments based on threat intelligence information for the generation of the scenarios. A real new concept that hadn't been implemented anywhere else. At the back end of that, we have been developing further work with the Bank of England, something called STAR-FS, so STAR, Simulated Targeted Attack and Response for Financial Services. And that is very much orientated towards the next level down for the UK. But we believe that the way that we've developed STAR with both the Bank of England and the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, this is the scheme that should be adopted more widely in terms of financial services organisations throughout the rest of the world. And this is very much the area that we are promoting. The reason for that is it's slightly less arduous in terms of the regulator functions, but has the same level of effectiveness, and also it doesn't compromise in terms of any of the quality services that are provided by both the threat intelligence industry and the penetration testing industry. We work very closely with the European Central Bank and with the Dutch in terms of the development of TIBER NL and also TIBER EU. And the basic principles associated with the work we've done in the UK is now being rolled out throughout the rest of Europe. There are some slight changes and some slight nuances in different regions, but the main principles still apply, and we believe that that's a very good thing. We've also extended it, and now we're working closely with the monetary authorities in Singapore. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority have implemented a very similar scheme. We're working with the Bank of Canada, and there is a whole list of other countries that we are currently working with in terms of supporting them for this type of scheme. But the whole concept behind it is the ability to facilitate the sharing of common good practice and speed the implementation of this type of what I think is essential assurance frameworks, whilst ensuring that we maintain consistency and quality. We've also started to look at how we would implement it in other critical national infrastructure sectors, such as telecommunications, within government, within the energy industry, and within aviation. And again, I think this is the direction of play for this type of simulated attack. In addition to that, in order to support the buying community, we have a buyer selection platform, which is available from our website, and this will allow organisations wishing to buy these types of services to make what we think is much more informed selections of the types of organisations that they should be including in terms of their invitations to tender. I won't go into this in too much detail, but I would recommend you have a look at it. It certainly describes all of the organisations that can provide services in Portugal and other parts of the European Union, and other parts of the world. So it's a really good resource for the buying community to understand what their marketplace looks like, who's gone through any formal accreditation by an independent third party, and who has the ability to provide those services locally. The other important thing to bear in mind is that all those organisations have signed a fully enforceable code of conduct, and therefore if there are any concerns about work that's being conducted, then you can use our complaints process to mount that type of activity. So in other words, if you report to us, we will investigate on your behalf. Really, that provides a number of benefits. So for the buying community, as I've mentioned, it provides access to trusted service organisations, and they utilise highly skilled, knowledgeable and competent individuals. It also helps, I believe, with the procurement support activities, and also I believe that some of the new work we're doing, which I'll come on to shortly, actually provides industry benchmarks. So very much we are providing a whole range of services for the buying community, ranging from maturity model assessments through to procurement guides, but very importantly, I believe for the future, we are providing industry benchmarks which we think we can measure. So for suppliers of services, I think it provides a meaningful differentiator. It certainly has enhanced the ability for organisations to market their services, and also to come over with some independent views in terms of the quality of the services that are being provided. Opening up things like CBEST and the work with Tiber EU and some other activities, I also think provides a much wider access to markets, and therefore much more vibrant activity within the marketplace. And I think, again, for the buying community, both in terms of regulators and in terms of buyers, that really helps the marketplace. What you need to have is a vibrant community that you can draw from, who have got talented individuals, but also work to specific standards and specific targets. And very importantly, those suppliers of services, because they're known to Crest, have got, I believe, got much better access in terms of talent. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was that we do quite a lot of knowledge sharing and sort of best practice development. We've been very fortunate to receive a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to look at building maturity model assessments for the global ecosystems. This programme is very much part of their activities for looking at financial inclusion for the poor. So what we've done so far is we have developed what we've called a process called SAMAGE, which is a national level cybersecurity maturity assessment. We've aligned it with the other cybersecurity indexes and other activities from organisations, for example, such as the Oxford University, and very much our maturity model assessment aligns with their process but goes into a little bit more detail. We provide 20 research fields per country. The work we've done so far looking at these 8 countries have got 4,000 unique references to external information. We've got 36,000 active databases entries. We've done maturity model assessments using quantitative analysis for over 600 financial services organisations. That number is increasing quite quickly. And also we've produced a number of individual country reports. All of this information will be available IPR free and free. So what we're trying to do is to provide, again, these metrics, but also access to good practice within the community. In terms of the assessment model, we've looked at 5 different dimensions: the national cybersecurity strategy and capabilities, looking at government and law enforcement, cybersecurity information sharing platforms, and again, looking at certs and looking at the information sharing platforms themselves, and the contribution and participation in national and international initiatives. We've looked at all of the cybersecurity service provisions, particularly the areas that CREST are responsible for, but we have extended that out. We've looked at cybersecurity professional development, ranging from universities and apprenticeship programs through to professional development activities, through the training organisations. And then we've looked at the banking security posture, specifically looking at some of the areas. Working with the regulators, we've identified a number of key aspects where there were significant concerns, and we've tried to extract those in terms of information that's been available and the types of vulnerabilities that the organisation should be most concerned about. In other words, we've looked at the thematic findings from the regulator activities, extracted those areas that we believe that there were most concerns about, and then what we've tried to do is to put quantitative measurement in this to allow that to happen. The way that we've done that is we've looked at non-intrusive vulnerability assessment, and we've also combined that with threat assessment. And all of these different aspects here are things that we can quantitatively measure externally. So these are very much the views that the hacking community would see. What that allows us to do is to look at all of the different organisations. So these are particularly financial services for this particular project, but we can then categorise all of those within the country marketplace. And what we're trying to do is to move people down from the very high risk areas, particularly, and trying to move them down in terms of aiming towards a medium level of risk. So in other words, looking at things like patching, looking at awareness programs, looking at the way that you do the different forms of accreditation. And what we're trying to do is to improve the overall position of the country in terms of its performance in terms of financial services, in terms of cyber risk. We believe this is very important because it allows comparison between countries, it identifies good practice, it identifies common areas of concern that therefore can be addressed, and it also allows the countries and also individual companies to monitor the impact to investment, something that was been very hard to do in the past. It provides clear measurable objectives for improvement, and also it's scalable. So in other words, we can increase this number of organisations that we consider as part of this assessment really very easily to provide much more data. And we have plans to do that. We're already doing maturity model assessments in other parts of the world, and those things will be fed in. As part of the project, we've looked at all of the available material that is there to help both at a national level and at a country level and others. And therefore, we've identified a number of gaps. So looking at this particular this particular set of presentations, very much looking at things like how you establish an effective cybercrime unit at a national level, and how you develop a cybercrime intervention program to stop young people and vulnerable people being groomed into cybercrime. We've got quite a lot of work already done in terms of providing support to regulators in terms of how they can use all the data that's available within the Samaj models. We have a whole range of services, a whole range of guides being written to support the buying community. And we have a number of different things that will help, we think, stimulate and grow the ecosystem within the countries. And that's very much done at the service delivery model. And then we're looking both at universities and training organisations to help. And we're also helping to develop career platforms and certification pump priming in those countries that are supported by the Gates Foundation. In summary, what we're trying to do here is really to look at the overall ecosystem. And I think the set of presentations you've got today are really a very good indication of the types of services that you need to have a level of maturity within the country to have a really functional cybersecurity overall environment. And so we're working to create a whole pile of programs and support activities that improve all areas of the cybersecurity ecosystem, both professional bodies, governments, regulators, buying communities and service selectors, and training and academia. This is a very short introduction. There's quite a lot I've tried to put over, which I apologise for going fast, but I hope it gives you an indication that there are some really good metrics around, and there are the ability to measure performance of individual companies or even countries, and also the ability to select what I believe are high quality, good quality service providers who have got access to skilled, knowledgeable and competent individuals. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ian. And thank you for sticking rigidly to time as well. I'm sure there's plenty of questions. I've got a couple, as I mentioned at the start. We'll save those for the session after each speaker has spoken. And now we're going to move on to 8 different presentations. These are going to be more quick fire, so they'll be up to 4 minutes each. And they'll all focus on a different perspective, I suppose, a different technology, threat or issue. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our first one, which is going to come from Vince Warrington, who's the Chief Executive of Dark Intelligence, and he's going to talk a little bit about the dark net.
Great, thanks for that. I'm just checking that you can all see my screen.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm going to give you a really quick whistle-stop tour of some of the threats we're seeing around the dark net. Dark Intelligence is essentially a digital intelligence agency. A lot of our people are from intelligence agency backgrounds, and we do a lot of work in the dark net, understanding what those advanced persistent threat groups are up to and how we can best combat them. So since about 2016, we've seen an increase in the use of the dark net by advanced persistent threat groups, essentially using it to cover their connections into organizations and to exfiltrate data out of organizations. This was, most commonly seen in the Equifax attack a few years ago, where a Chinese APT got in through an insecure device using a darknet connection and exfiltrated data out over that device using darknet connections. So the great thing for an advanced persistent threat group is you can do these sorts of reconnaissances with impunity. You can probe for weaknesses in the network. You can exfiltrate data out, and you can make it almost impossible to identify when these attacks are going on. So they're really quite sophisticated. And what we've seen is, as organizations move towards things such as next generation firewalls that will automatically block connections from, say, the Tor network, what we're finding with advanced persistent threat groups is they're working their way around that. So they understand that firewalls will block those connections, so they'll use what we call proxy chains when they exit the darknet, so that they can still connect up and not be classed as a darknet connection by the firewall. And that's kind of where we come in. We've done a lot of work and research on advanced persistent threat groups, their tools and tactics, what they're up to. We have Chinese and Russian language speakers. We're also scaling up with our Spanish and Portuguese side, primarily because we're looking at threat actors coming from Mexico and Brazil. And so really what we're looking for and what we wanted to quickly talk to you about is our monitoring service. So essentially what we can do is we will spot any connection coming from the darknet that's attempting to get inside your network, and also we can spot any connection coming out of your network that is going into the darknet. And that typically for financial services should never happen. Typically that would be a sign of data being stolen by an advanced persistent threat group. So part of what we're doing is providing that monitoring service and giving really good information on the threat groups that are targeting you, how they're targeting you, and really giving you the good data on darknet connections in and out, which is a really high-tech capability that we can offer. What we also do, I know there are some regulators that are on the call. We can do sharing of threat intelligence with you and your peers. We're doing some work with the UK's university sector at the moment, where we're looking at darknet activity around all of the UK's universities, specifically around the kind of COVID data, COVID research, vaccine research that's been going on. And we've come to some really good and interesting statistics that we've seen in the sector, such as there were 3 big spikes of activity last year in the UK's university sector of darknet activity related to those to kind of vaccines and COVID development. So we can provide for regulators that really good kind of thematic review of what's happening in the sector and share that information. And then for all of our clients, we can anonymize other client data, share it with you as well. So not only do you see the .NET activity that's aimed at you, but you can find out what's happening in the sector as well. And that's just one last thing, is we are backed by Innovate UK, the British government's innovation agency. And if you there's my contact details on the screen, and would be delighted to talk to you further in future. And I think that's just under 4 minutes.
Perfect. Thanks, Vince. That's great. And 2 speakers and both to time, so setting the tone for the rest of the morning. Next up, we've got Mariana Pereira, who's Director of Email Security Products at Darktrace, and she's going to touch on cyber and AI.
Good morning. Am I off mute?
Yeah, all
okay,
good.
Great. And you can all see my screen, yes?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let's get that clock going and see if I can be 3 for 3. Good morning, everyone. Bom dia. I'm Mariana Pereira. For those of you in Portugal, you will notice a common last name. No, I'm not cousins of any of your relations. I'm a British-born Brazilian, raised in Italy. And it's a pleasure to speak to you all today across all of these different country lines. So Darktrace, unlike the previous speaker, we have nothing to do with the dark net. Darktrace is an artificial intelligence company based in the UK in Cambridge. You might have heard of us as we've recently gone public. And the thing about Darktrace is that we've come from a philosophy of cybersecurity in which we've accepted that it's basically impossible to predict cyber threats. And attacks and in automated attacks. So how do we balance business innovation and the need to be open and collaborative with the world while also achieving a cyber secure workforce? So by definition, ever since, well, definitely 2021, but already since before, any security team has got to be able to deal with the unpredictable. It has to deal with the world as it is and not how it should be. And that means embracing the right technologies, I would say AI-powered technologies, to secure and enable, and importantly, to protect your workforce. And embracing AI, we've been able to create a remedy in the form of an immune system for our businesses. And just like the human body has a skin, you need a digital immune system that will catch the attackers once they get in past that skin layer. And this is the approach that Darktrace has taken for the last 7 years, and we call it the enterprise immune system. And it embodies those same principles of the human immune system, not only in the defensive, but also in its ability to fight back in real time against never before seen threats. That's because the human immune system can understand self, which means it knows what normal looks like. It understands what it means to be part of this business or part of this body. And by understanding what normal looks like, it can identify when something doesn't belong. And this is a powerful shift in mentality, I think, also in cybersecurity, because this approach of understanding belonging and moving away from good versus bad, something being allowed in or not allowed into your business, moves that equation away from the legacy way of thinking about cyber defense and is a more holistic and inclusive way to think about the threats also that might come from business partners such as suppliers, or even your customers, who are sometimes used as attack vectors into your organization using that sort of trusted connection or that trusted identity. So by taking this approach of understanding what normal is for your business, we can identify completely new, never before seen threats. So remembering when we detected APT41, even before it was attributed to that specific group, or a number of ransomware campaigns since 2019 that were brand new on the scene, but the immune system is in order to understand that it represents a threat to your organization and to your livelihood. So of course, this AI does this across the entire digital estate, learning from your network, be it your corporate network if it's on premise, but also, of course, all of those cloud environments, SaaS implications, industrial machinery, IoT devices, and of course, email, which is my main focus. Thankfully, AI is good at dealing with the uncertainty and it can constantly recalculate. And this is why we are constantly spotting never before seen attacks. And the AI's autonomous response, different from automatic response, means that it can stop things even without it being predefined. Would love to catch up some more, and I think that's time for me. So thank you very much, and on to the next speaker.
Great, thanks, Mariana. Next up, we've got Peter Close, Global Sales Director at GalaxKey, and he's going to talk a little bit about encryption and digital identity verification. Over to you, Peter.
Okay. Just checking you can see my presentation.
Still loading.
Still loading. Okay. 1 second. Can you see now?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Okay. So hi everybody, my name is Peter Close. I'm the Global Sales Director at GalaxKey. We're a UK cyber company, very fast growing, and the area that we cover is encryption effectively. So within our platform we have 3 or 4 different solutions. As you can see down the right hand side, we cover email encryption, document encryption, digital signatures or electronic signatures, as you may refer to them, and also secure workspace or secure file transfer. And all of these areas are really key requirements in the financial services industry. You know, all banks, all financial service providers, they're required to secure the communications to and from their organisations, and that's where we play. We're seeing a lot of interest at the moment. We've got banks and financial organisations throughout EMEA who have taken on our solutions, and it's really to hit the main 3 points that I've put on the slide here, which is security and compliance. So being able to secure the data, not just in one area but across the whole portfolio. So most hacks that we've seen recently are taking the data from store, so it's important to actually encrypt the data at store and in transit, and fully encrypt all your communications between yourselves and your supply chain. So again, many, I'm sure you've read about many of the breaches that have happened recently, and quite often they've been lower down the food chain within the supply area to the organisation that's actually been breached. So it's securing those communications all the way through, and that helps to meet GDPR or the regulations that I'm sure you're very familiar with. Specifically, what I wanted to focus on for this session was the 2 areas at the bottom there. So anti-phishing, as I'm sure you're aware, one of the biggest issues facing financial providers today. Who are you actually sending information to? Personal information, personal identity information, and what it may be. How can you be sure that the person you're sending it to is correct? And we've launched a couple of new technologies we'll come on to shortly, which is Know Your Client, or EKYC as we call it, Know Your Client, Know Your Customer, and an AML for anti-money laundering. So again, very specific to the audience today. Just a little brief of our credentials. We're certified, or our encryption, our file format that underpins our solutions is encrypted, is authorised by the National Cybersecurity Centre, so the NCSC in the UK. We're one of only 2 suppliers in the UK to have got this level of clearance, and it's called CPA, or Certified Product Assurance. So we are in government organisations, I say financial organisations, across both local sector, public sector, central government, etc. So you know, we have the backing and we have the accreditation to prove it. But specifically for this, I wanted to cover off a solution that we've launched relatively recently with a partner of ours called Yoti. Now Yoti are they're leaders in biometric authorization, but it's the digital ID, the digital identity that's key. And the combination of the 2 solutions provides a fully compliant EKYC and AML solution. So Know Your Client, Know Your Customer, and anti-money laundering. Recently in the UK, the UK Post Office has taken a solution to roll out for financial transactions, both from a corporate level down to a personal level. So it's giving you a solution that combines those 2 areas, completely eliminates the risk of phishing, and it's this enhanced level of identity-based encryption. So you upload your passport or your driving license or some kind of ID that proves it's you, and then that's digitally authorized and digitally approved. as well as the solution and the communication that you're sending through being completely encrypted from source. So, you know, it's something I wanted to make everybody aware of. It's a new way of thinking almost within the industry, and it's a very, very good solution that we've launched with our partners in Yoti. And that's all I wanted to cover off. So that's me done.
Thanks, Peter. Fantastic. And just to note for attendees, we will circulate post-event any of the slides that we're able to share, as well as contact details for the speaking organisations, just to save you scribbling those away there. Next up, we've got James Nielsen, who's the Vice President for Sales across Europe, Middle East and Africa for Immersive Labs, and he's going to talk about the importance of people in all this. So over to you, James.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I think Sophia's going to drive for me, so thanks, Sophia. Are you just loading the slides?
I can see them now, yeah.
You can see them now. Okay. So good morning, everyone. James Nielsen, VP of EMEA at Immersive Labs. And at Immersive Labs, we fundamentally believe that cyber is a human challenge. I don't think the world has spent more money than they spend today on cybersecurity tooling and techniques, yet no, are we any safer? No, data breaches are more prevalent than they've ever been. Ransomware is much more prevalent than it's ever been, and it's not really going to stop. So if we go on to the next slide, Sophia. Whilst tech's critically important, fundamentally people should be your greatest asset in cyber defence. But how do we develop and train and exercise and evidence that our people are up to scratch? So typically cyber training has been knowledge-based, it's been expensive, it's been linear, it's been an annual training course, it's been videos, and that's not how cyber defenders want to train and want to learn. And if you do that, there's no real way to stress test that human capability that you have in your organisation. How can they? They might know the knowledge, but can they actually do the deed, do the task to defend against cyber? And if you're a business owner, a CISO or not a CEO or business owner with a huge investment into cyber defence, how confident are you that it can protect your organisation and it's up to scratch? So that's why Immersive Labs was born, to try and solve this problem and do it differently. We have got an online gamified learning platform that's really micro learning labs that run real world environments, covering scenarios as and when vulnerabilities, threats, techniques come out. We are putting labs into the platform days, maybe even hours after these techniques are relevant, so that people can equip themselves, learn, enable, skill up, exercise and test themselves in the labs, where it's not videos, it's actual real hands-on learning, and people are getting tested without hints and tips to prove that they've got the capabilities to cover the latest vulnerabilities or threats or areas against NICE frameworks, MITRE attacks, whatever way you want to map these labs. And then business owners can see the capabilities of individuals, of teams, of their organisation against NICE or MITRE frameworks, and effectively evidence that they have the capability and skills to protect and secure their organisation. So that's why Immersive Labs was born, and that's how we go about taking people development to a different level. I don't want to use football as an example, but I think parallels are quite good. Obviously, I'm Scottish, so don't want to talk about football. But if you think about golf, the equipment in golf has moved on in the last 5-10 years massively. The techniques to kind of play the game have moved on, and whilst I know the rules of golf, unless I'm keeping up to pace with the latest techniques and tools, whether I'm out practicing and exercising, then I can't improve my game of golf, right? It's not a knowledge-based game, it's a skills-based game, and cyber's very much like that. And then it's quite easy in golf, you get a handicap. So I'm handicap 12, everyone can kind of make an assessment of how good I am at golf. In cyber, there's not that handicap, right? No, business owners need that evidence, and that's what Immersive Labs can provide. Sophia, next slide, please. We don't just do it for cyber defenders, we do it for coders and engineers as well, to help them develop and improve their skills at developing secure code. And we've just recently launched crisis simulation for doing it with business leaders, where we can run online simulations, kind of replacing the paper-based exercises that often go on at board level, and we run that in an online platform, testing and equipping business leaders to respond to crisis simulations as well, mostly related around cyber. And just last slide, Sophia, please, just to give you an overview of kind of who we are. So we were founded in 2017, based in, or headquartered in Bristol, UK. We turn over about 20 million in revenue. 220 staff today, and we've literally this month just completed our Series C investment, valuing us at 400 million, 75 million investment to scale out from the UK across the globe. We're probably 6 months into that scale out in America. We're just starting to scale out from the UK across EMEA and APJ, planning on being 600 people by early next year. And I think it makes us the second fastest tech growing company out of the UK and the fastest cyber growing tech company out of the UK. Now, Barclays, HSBC, Lloyds Bank, MOD, intelligence services, police, NHS, you name it, we've got the high end of town covered in the UK, and we're looking to scale out across the rest of the world. So that is a massive labs, folks. Thank you.
Thanks, James, and commiserations on being a Scotland supporter. We've got Jamie Smith, who's Solutions Architect at Interseed, and he's also going to talk about securing digital identity.
Hi there. Usual check.
Yeah, all good, all good.
Excellent. When somebody gives me a 4-minute deadline, I always have a great temptation to boil an egg, but I won't. I will save you that for this one. So, hello, my name's Jamie Smith. I'm a solution architect at Interseed Limited. Interseed are a software company based in the UK, although we have offices in the US. All our development is done in the UK. And we have one product, and that product is MyID. MyID is a world-leading credential management solution. So what does that really mean? What does it really do? Well, most surveys these days point to 81% of data breaches being due to weak or compromised passwords or authentication. Attackers don't break in, attackers log in. And so particularly in financial services, what you need is to make sure that your employees have credentials to authenticate that are strongly bound. You know, it's them, and that could be backed up by biometric information, for example. You want cryptographically based solutions, so that's not based on any shared secret or anything like that. And you want a sort of non-replicable solutions as well. You don't want them to be able to copy that data across. And basically that's what MyID does. So we're the key to the door security wise. So we represent digital identities of individuals. We represent the devices that they have. We look after those. So in the old days, that could just be a smart card if you're looking at a certificate-based access. But these days, that's extended out to smart card, mobile devices, FIDO devices. You may have a backup device in your laptop, and all that has to be managed to make sure to give that key to the door safety. And that needs to be done in an easy to use way, and it needs to be centrally managed as well. So you've got lots of vendors, so you need a vendor independent solution that manages all these different technologies, products that your users are using, and to do that from under one single pane of glass. And that's really what MyID does. So we manage 15 million digital identities worldwide, and we're cross-vertical. So we do a lot of work in the government and military space, national identities, aerospace, and we're honoured to have several banking and finance customers throughout Europe, in the UK, US, and even Australia. So why do banking customers and financial customers need us? For a start, we're vendor independent, so we recognise we're part of the solution. We're the front door of that solution. So we need to work with existing infrastructure that you have in place. We don't want you to rip out everything to use us. So we're vendor independent. We work with most of the solution providers and hardware systems, certificate authorities, hardware security models, LDAPs, identity management, all that fun stuff in the background. We have connectors for, but also we make sure that we work with you around your internal policies and your internal procedures, because we want this to be simple to manage and we want the users to have a simple experience for it. And as I say, we manage a range of those devices as well. So where once a smart card, we're looking at mobile, we're looking, as you can see on the image there, we're looking at USB devices as well. So basically we run that as well as the business context. So for example, if I'm an employee and I use my smart card to scrape ice off the windscreen and I break my smart card, we would replace that smart card. But if I have my wallet stolen, then you're looking at encryption certificates, authentication certificates that that have been compromised. So we would issue the new device with those with a new certificate, encryption and authentication. We'd revoke that encryption certificate and authentication certificate. We'd issue a new one. We'd give you a copy of the old one so you could decrypt the stuff you had. But then you're also looking at managing that across a mobile device, for example, or maybe on you have a virtual card on your laptop. So all that level of management is automatically done through there. So it's a very interesting world out there. It's these devices are increasing. We're looking at things like FIDO as well. So whereas with our financial customers, we tend to work with employee authentication, we're now looking at supply chain, giving out FIDO devices across that and putting that all together in one system. So that's us, and that's my ID, securing your identities simply, securely, and at scale. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jamie. 3 left. Can I introduce Andrew Lynn, Principal Consultant at Security Risk Management, and Andrew's going to give us a cyber expert's perspective on fintech.
Morning, it's great to be with you today. I'm Andrew Lynn, Principal Consultant at Security Risk Management. SRM is one of the UK's leading privately owned cyber and information security consultancies, offering a wide range of services. These include ISO 27001 implementation and audit, PCI DSS compliance, and advanced penetration testing as a CREST member. SRM is also able to provide valuable support and resource to in-house CISOs and DPOs on a flexible basis through our virtual model. We're internationally recognized and trusted by card brands such as Visa and MasterCard as digital forensics specialists and are accredited to conduct payment forensics investigations under the PCI DSS schemes. In the last few years, SRM has been working with several fintech companies. The financial technology fintech sector has emerged with the growth of the internet and particularly mobile technologies. Startups are looking to either take existing, typically consumer banking products and deliver those in an innovative manner, perhaps with new and additional features, or exploit a niche within market offerings, providing consumer convenience or innovative products. Like a lot of internet startups, they're agile, fast, and looking to be first to market. However, this generates a unique clash of cultures. These innovative, agile companies are operating within a well-established traditional banking world. Indeed, there's often a reliance on traditional banking companies and infrastructure to enable fintech products, be that card issuing, payment infrastructure, trading infrastructure, and so on. And the banking world is not a free-for-all like some other emerging internet markets, where everyone is making up the rules as they go. There are laws and regulations in place with government and industry bodies to uphold them. Added to this, there are often stresses of being a fast-growing company, attempting to create new products with a new management structure and new people. all while shareholders or investors are looking for results. Security risk management has been able to come alongside fintech companies and assist in addressing some of these challenges, providing knowledge and understanding of regulatory requirements with respect to information security, and enabling fintech to know what's being asked and the importance of this. Helping fintech to understand the operational and information security risks that they face and putting in place risk treatment plans to address these, presenting these as necessary for things such as e-money license applications. Developing governance structures for effective management of information security whilst working within the culture of the company that is developing. And reviewing an assessment of control implementation and effectiveness, including formal assessments such as PCI DSS, where applicable. I realise many of you may be not from a fintech company, but there's a good chance that you will be interacting with them. And SRM is able to assist on both sides of the fence, and we would be happy to hear from you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Now we've got a slight change to the agenda now. So we were supposed to hear from Alex Gay, the Senior Sales Director at Sensient. Unfortunately, the technology's failed us on this occasion, so I can confirm that Alex is very much been trying to jump on the call, but the technology's not allowed us to do that. What we will do after the event is endeavour to make sure that Alex has the opportunity to engage with any of the audience that would like to. So we'll include the slides and also his contact details for anyone on the call at the moment. So that means that we move on to our last speaker for this morning. So last but not least, Dr. Rachel O'Connell, founder and CEO of Trust Elevate, and she's going to talk to us about child age verification and parental consent.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So Trust Elevate provides eKYC for under 16. So we enable digital onboarding of teen and child bank accounts. And if I can go to the next slide. So anybody here who's tried to open a child bank account will realize just how much pain it is. You have to physically go into a bank with your identity and 3 utility bills and have somebody eyeball you and say, how likely is it that this person is that child's parent or the authorized holder of parental responsibility? Now, if you think for banks, their new customers are going to be their future customers. Sorry, beg your pardon, program. 92% of kids are online, so they expect everything to be digital first. That's 83.7 million kids. 72 million of those kids do not have a bank account. 2/3 of parents give their kids an allowance, or they pay them for Saturday job, or they get paid for Saturday jobs. This is a liquidity amount of 55.7 billion, right? Currently, the cost of customer acquisition is about 225 for that in-branch process. By digital onboarding, we can reduce that by 40 times. When we look at the potential customer lifetime value, you can see the figures there. So this is a really important opportunity to consider. And if you can move to the next slide, I'll just turn off my phone. Right, so we do an eKYC process. We verify an assertion of parental responsibility for a child. We verify the identity of and age of the child, and we also verify which residence the child is at. And I'm the technical author of the standard that was published by the British Standards Institute on how you conduct identity attribute verification. It's currently in the process of becoming an ISO standard. We were through the GCHQ Telephonic Accelerator Programme and are part of the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre's alumni. So we built this tech in alignment with digital identity standards and have been through an accreditation process. We're also part of the UK's Financial Conduct Authority's regulatory sandbox, because critically, we do not rely on you scanning a passport or biometrics and those things that cause friction in the onboarding process. We check against authoritative data sources, and we also have a zero knowledge, zero trust, zero data model. We don't hold any personal data. We don't know, because we're hashing the data points that the parent provides and permissions and checking against authoritative data sources. It's hashed at both ends. It's an end-to-end encrypted process. So we've taken a huge amount of time to work with the cryptographers at GCHQ to develop a product that will enable digital first banking. And if we can move to the next slide. Right, so my background is in the identity sector. Our CISO is a highly experienced person who's scaled businesses and is regarded as number 1 or number 2 in the top 100 thought leaders on cybersecurity. Our chief architect is a systems engineer and also a data analyst, and knows about how to scale and use graphs, and we're using the latest things like Golang, Kubernetes to scale, etc. So, and if you would like to know more, my name is Rachel O'Connell. My email on the next slide is rachel@trustelevate.com. So the key takeaway, we're eKYC for under 16s, child identity verification, parental authorization. We remove the need for going in branch. We do not rely on biometrics or document scanning. We're relying on authoritative data sources that are routinely updated, and we can run checks. Because the data resides on the customers on the edge, we can recheck on a regular basis. So that means the checks are real time, and we issue vectors of trust. Vectors of trust are a new way of giving levels of assurance, and this has been accepted by the Internet Engineering Technical Task Force. And we're working with the G7 countries in terms of their rollout of interoperable EIDs across the world. And then the final slide is my contact details, rachel@trustelevate.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks to all the speakers for sticking to time. We're going to move on to questions and answers now. Please do put questions for the panelists into the chat function. I'll start with a couple of my own, but the ones that in the chat will be fed through to me, so we'll try and get through as many of those as possible. I think I'll bring Ian back in first and give him the opportunity to kind of comment on the different solutions and perspectives that we've just heard on, but also pose a question on. You touched heavily on the themes of community building and the importance of the individual skills. I wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit, and particularly how Crest views that golden triangle, if you like, of technology, process and people.
So first of all, I really enjoyed the presentations. I thought they were very good, but it does show that we need a whole variety of different activities within the cybersecurity community to actually put things together. And what we need to do is to collaborate to make sure that they operate together in an effective way. And that very much leads to your second point, Dan, in terms of looking at that triangle of technology, people and process. And there is a heavy dependence on technology. And I think that is unavoidable. And I think in some ways it's a bit of a shame that the technology is played down. Because whatever good processes you have in place in terms of protecting individuals or running security awareness programs, there is still a massive amount of technology that sits behind it in terms of trying to do the measurement and trying to do the defence. It was quite interesting. We really struggled with the concept of how do we measure cybersecurity awareness from an external perspective, and the way that we did that was we identified leaked credentials. So in other words, we looked at financial services organisations and we looked at their emails, and then we looked at the leaked emails that were available on the internet, and by doing that, the assumption was that if somebody was abiding by the policies and processes that they needed to have in place and were looking at, then they wouldn't be using their email addresses for, we'll call them non-business related activities where they could be exposed to additional threats. But without the technology that sits behind that, that would be a really difficult thing. So we identified an awful lot of credentials of financial services organisations, individuals with leaked credentials, and that would suggest that the processes in place, the policies in place, and therefore we've got to rely on the technologies to help us. And certainly some of the technologies that have been described here are I believe, essential. The threat intelligence, the ability to have development programs for individuals to understand how they use technologies, to have authentication. Authentication is one of those key factors that the regulators identified as being a major concern, and the whole concept of identity. The last presentation was really good because it described that issue of how on earth do we look at identity, how do we manage identity, and I think it's wider than just looking at the youth population. You know, if some of the countries we're looking at for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, absolutely identity of individuals and therefore providing them access to financial services is absolutely essential. And those whole massive untapped marketplaces that are available to the European community to trade into, if we can't identify the individuals and we can't provide those banking services to known individuals, then I think we're going to really struggle. So I thought it was a really good set of presentations which showed a lot of the different aspects of the ecosystem that's required, and I thought it pulled out some really good thought-provoking activities that maybe we should work together in terms of the countries to try to find better solutions.
Thanks, Ian. And I'm gonna stick with that technology strand, and I certainly think that it's a case of marrying those three different areas, and that's how you kind of get the real kind of gains. So sticking with the technology point, I'm going to pose the next one to Mariana, and I'm always conscious that, you know, the people on the panel talk about cybersecurity all day, every day, but it only takes a conversation with friends or family to realise that for the majority of people, just do not care. So often these things are kind of alien to people working in the companies that, you know, the solutions we've talked about today can really help. So to Mariana, how can we get companies to adapt and adopt to AI technologies and engage with them?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. You know, what's funny is I will just disagree. I think that they do care, but there's a vast underappreciation of how to care and how to start understanding. In many of these events, some of you might have heard also of my telling the story of how my dad actually got hit with ransomware 3 months after I started working at Darktrace. And 3 years later, he also fell for a e-commerce fake site that was set up during the pandemic. So I sort of feel despair every time I hear these stories, because it's like, Dad, do not listen to me when I'm telling you these stories. And I'm sure we all have served as IT and technical support to all of our friends and families. How do we get our colleagues to adopt AI? Well, I think we need to sort of change the way that we're framing the setup around cybersecurity. So we move away from what feels like an enormous game of whack-a-mole, where we're constantly just trying to put out those fires or repeatedly knock out, you know, ransomware, identity theft, or business email compromise, or whatever the type of threat it is that we're dealing with, and really shift into more of a proactive mindset. Policies are all well and good, but they are also limited in capability because they can only stop those things or address a certain level of activities, and they also limit the company's ability then to grow beyond the policies. So I think that as we are having these in terms of getting all of these technologies to work together and the people to work alongside technology, what AI does, it gives us that next acceleration. It allows the security team to be supercharged. It allows us to look beyond those policies, and it will allow us to go at speed and scale to find those anomalies and those novel attacks, which is the only thing that I think we can expect from the future. Is there will be more of them because it's hugely lucrative for the attackers.
Thanks, Mariana, and I can only imagine how much more interested your dad is now in your day-to-day work. Similar question I'm going to pose to Vince, and you know, for most people, the dark web's also alien to them. You know, we kind of know about it from a far-off perspective, but obviously it's a hotbed for criminal activity. What can finance firms do there? Like, where do you start?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question in that it's quite often the dark web is very misunderstood, especially in kind of corporate environments. It's actually really, really small. You know, if you think of the billions of websites that we have out on the kind of surface web, it's only ever kind of 15,000 to 20,000 websites that are on the dark web. So it's a very small environment. What is key for financial services, though, is being aware of a couple of things. The first is, have you had a breach, and therefore has your data ended up on the dark web, which is, obviously a key thing to know. I think for financial services, especially in the banking sector, that in future that might start extending to have any of my customers being compromised, so that as a bank we can be able to turn around and warn them. But in terms of the darknet itself, which is those connections that are coming out of the dark web, out of Tor, for example, and hitting your network, or coming out of your network and hitting the darknet, it's really it's an interesting place to be, because for financial services you will see, for example, lots of connections coming out and hitting your network, because there's everything from highly sophisticated groups out there to chancers who will just try it on the off chance that your website is insecure. If you're looking then at data coming out of a network to the darknet, that actually never happened in a financial services environment. So it's kind of key to look for those, and it's not just your core networks. What we often find is there will be systems that are kind of not very well monitored that tend to get hit. So if you've got industrial control systems, so in this environment, things like ATMs will typically try to be targeted, because there's a perception amongst the cyber criminal gangs that they're not as well protected as core banking systems are. So we see a lot of activity towards ATM networks, and we also see activity towards, as other people mentioned, kind of that third-party risk. So we have a client who I won't name, who has gone through a process where their a core supplier was hit, essentially, an advanced gang connected up to their networks via the darknet that then allowed them to pass through into the core client, and then the advanced persistent threat group was extracting data out via the third party and from the third party out. And it's one of those interesting things where how our service operates, we can monitor those very, very easily. We can monitor those connections very, very easily, and it has minimal impact on the in-house teams. It has a minimal impact on the third party. We can all do it fully as a service and provide that information. So being aware of that darknet traffic around your networks and around your third party networks is kind of becoming more and more key for dealing with the really sophisticated threats out there.
Thanks, Vince. And once obviously awareness for some of these issues is the first step, and then so digital identity has been a hot topic this morning. So the next question is going to be for Jamie. But once you get that awareness, you've got to move to gauging effectiveness of solutions. So how can the audience best gauge which solution is going to be best for them?
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's a very good question. And what we're seeing actually is what used to be quite a homogeneous, quite a well-defined scenarios out there where people were using PKI, so certificate-based services, etc. internally. They're now looking to expand and have strong authentication. People have touched on today around things like supply chain, etc. But people are getting the way your organization has policies around certificates is not likely to be reflected within your supply chain customers. So you could look at other technologies around that, such as FIDO, where maybe a $10 device but crypto based that you're looking after is more suitable for those people who need to authenticate to, for example, web services where it's particularly strong, whereas people in your organization want to use a smart card with PKI, do non-repudiation, encrypted emails, etc. So we're working with a company at the moment who is implementing those different technologies alongside mobile. So they're looking at mobile internally to authenticate, but with PKI certificates on there, and also for visitors who come in accessing their Wi-Fi within the premises. Little things like that as well are important, and they all have different solutions. So really, the efficiency is around the different types of technologies out there, and also making efficiency one of the things you touched on today, efficiency really does come into the people and policy side of it as well. So, you know, if you've got regulatory advantages of maybe a different technology, and you want to make things nice and simple for all the different people coming in, using these technologies. So there is no magic answer, but what we're finding is that organizations are now taking a range of different technologies, and that's great for us. And we're working with them to be able to manage that from a single pane of glass management. So we can look at your suppliers, we can meet the FIDO requirements, which may be less than the PKI requirements and may require, you know, costly internal support and internal knowledge around PKI isn't needed for the other one. So it's the ability to choose that, work with your partner, try these different solutions out, see how it fits, make sure they're hitting your regulations, and you know, pushing my ID, but it's having a solution in there that you're managing all of these, because the management side of lots of different systems can actually quickly overtake the cost of implementing in the first place.
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks for mentioning the skills and people point as well, because it kind of segues into my next question, which is for James. Two kind of linked questions, I suppose. I always point to Immersive Labs as a great example of an organisation that does that, getting people interested in point through the gamification element really well. But how do you go one step further than that and keep people interested past that initial engagement with the product? And also, how does Immersive Labs empower organisations to increase and specifically measure and demonstrate those human capabilities in cyber?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great question. So, look, we've got something like 1,200 labs for the cyber defenders. So, recruiting cyber talent is very tough. There's a huge shortage in cyber talent, and really the only answer for a lot of organizations is to try and develop your own cyber talent from within, or pay a lot of money to try and bring in the best. So it's normally a mix of both strategies, and we have a lot of labs to take people on learning journeys and learning paths from fairly junior cyber defenders into more advanced levels. So I think that's what gets them interested to start with, but what keeps them interested is really that real time, almost, or certainly within hours or days, updating the labs with the new emerging threats, vulnerabilities, techniques that are coming out to keep people relevant. It's back to the golf analogy. Do you know what I mean? I know how the rules of golf. It doesn't make me a great golfer. I've got to practice. I've got to be a good golfer. I've probably got to go out and practice weekly. To be a great golfer, a champion golfer, I've got to probably train every day, right? And it's similar in cyber, where in golf the technologies may be moving in the pace of years or decades. In cyber, it's moving in days, in weeks, and defenders need to stay abreast of that, practice, and be ready to react should those threats hit the organization. So I think that's what keeps people interested in the platform once they've been on the learning journey. The second bit is the evidence, and I think that's key, right? Now I can say I'm a 12 handicapper and people can gauge globally what level of golfer I am. It's much harder in cyber defense, right? So against maybe a MITRE framework or an IC framework, what does that individual capable of doing? Now, can we evidence against the labs that he's completed or she's completed their skill set and their ability to defend against certain threats? And in the complexity of cyber, nobody can possibly cover all the skill sets in today's world, but knowing that as a team you have maybe the whole MITRE framework covered, or you have strength and depth 2 or 3 levels, or you know that if Susan's off, we've got a real problem because Susan's the only one that can deal with XYZ threats. Giving that evidence back to business owners in an organization is very powerful to develop further training and provide some level of assurance that the organization's covered, and that's what Immersive Labs can help with.
Thanks, James. And for those non-golfers in the room, a handicap of 12 makes him a pretty handy golfer. Next one's for Peter. You mentioned the Yoti partnership towards the end of your presentation. Obviously, 4 minutes isn't a great time to elaborate on that, but why is that identity verification element a game-changing addition to the Galaxy Key platform?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'm not going to mention my golf handicap because it's much higher than 12, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in the presentation with Galaxy, we cover that sort of communication, securing the supply chain, encrypting all the areas that you can be sending information out through, and having that IoT partnership added to that to give that digital ID and that digital verification on top of that. And being able to manage that all through one solution is really game changing for some of our customers. So we feel it's a really important addition. I think, as one of the other speakers mentioned, it's partnering with another organisation as well to bring that technology to bear. It just adds a great feature to an already really strong communication platform. So, as I mentioned, most hacks that we're aware of happen with the data's in store. If you can actually be sure that you're sending that data, that PII or personal identifiable information, to the right person through a fully encrypted platform, then I say it can be game changing for the organisation. So we just thought it was a really important addition to the portfolio. And as has been proven on this session, it's such a big subject and a big area to cover at the moment that we're pleased to have that partnership in place.
Thanks, Peter. I've got two questions now. Not knowing the space as well as I might, they might be linked, they might not be, but they're for Rachel. One of them's come through from the audience in the chat, so I'll start with that one. Regarding the account for children, how can you confirm that the parents will not use the account for ML, AML, etc.? What is in place for protection? And then my own question, how does Trust Elevate enable payment initiation service providers and account information service providers to operate in compliance with PSD2? You're on mute, Rachel.
So I'll take the second one first. So Trust Elevate enables companies such as Facebook, Google, TikTok, and others to comply with a whole raft of regulations, right? The General Data Protection Regulation, Article 8 says if you're going to process kids' data, anybody under 16, you need parental consent. So we're offering to those companies a 360 compliance across a raft of regulations, GDPR, e-privacy, Payment Services Directive. Now, Google and Facebook, for example, are payment initiation service providers. They have those licenses. So we enable, you guys will be familiar with that, under the Payment Services Directive, you need secure customer authentication, and a child bank account is a sub-account of a parent's account, so you need parental authorization. So you need the verified authorized holder of parental responsibility who's engaged in the contract with the bank to enable the bank-to-bank transactions. So that's how we enable the digital onboarding so the kid can get a bank account in the first place. And then when enabling bank-to-bank transactions in compliance with open banking and PSD2 requirements, we enable that authorization to happen. So we comply with the Joint Money Laundering Steering Group's requirements and the PSD2 requirements. And then in terms of, and we run intelligent monitoring systems, so there's different levels of trust required. If it's just a requirement for an age check, for example, of a child when they're accessing content, there's a lower level of assurance that's required and a lower cost associated with that. You elevate the level of trust required if it's a bank-to-bank transaction, hence the name of our company. So we're enabling that flexibility across platforms. And then in terms of the first question is, how do we enable banks to prevent fraudulent activity on child bank accounts? Was that the? So yeah. We run the typical anti-fraud and intelligent monitoring systems that we have developed and that we are partnered with other companies to provide will be able to detect those sorts of behaviours online, and then we work with the banks to flag any suspicious activities and have SLAs in place with them about what actions we should take in response to those.
Thanks, Rachel. And one for Andrew. You talked about working with emerging fintechs, and obviously lots of those companies and organisations will face similar challenges. In your view, what's the most common challenge that you see, and how do you advise them to overcome it? And also, what's the greatest one? So two slightly different questions.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways they come up to the same thing. In reality, that it's that innovative, fast-paced, first-to-market culture which has emerged. So somebody's come up with their great new idea. They've developed it. They've started to make it work. They've got some investors. They want to stay ahead of the game. They want new features to go out onto the mobile app as soon as possible, and so on and so forth. But it's how do you marry that together with the compliance requirements and the security requirements that we all know, and indeed, some of the technologies we've been discussing, we all know are essential, without just putting a weight around their neck, and indeed them rejecting that out of hand, and therefore buy-in has to be essential. Yes, regulatory requirements do provide a bit of a stick, that they have to do certain things, but really buy-in to make it work. And looking at how that's then implemented throughout the organization. So this may be in non-traditional ways. Suddenly, if you find the companies run mostly over Slack channels and things like that, is saying, how do we get management structure? How do we get information security controls? How do we get people working with each other in secure ways in non-traditional, I suppose, environments and things like that? Made even worse perhaps with the pandemic, where we're all fractured and living out of our own front rooms. So an example within that perhaps would be, how do we integrate good, secure software development practices within the agile models that are often employed? Or how do we look to implement controls around cloud environments that scale on demand using Puppet or Kubernetes or so on and so forth, in such a way that those remain secure all the way through? So that's just perhaps some of the examples there.
Thanks, Andrew. And just is an interesting parallel there between, I suppose, what you're talking about in the financial services fintech space with, what we saw at the start of the pandemic, people rushing to, work as normal from home, kind of doing that overnight almost, sometimes at the expense of that kind of security element. So is it about balancing that security and resilience with the constant need for progress on the technology front? Is that how you characterize it?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, because the fintech companies are working within the banking world, they are going to have to do some things differently from other emerging technologies. So there will be, to a certain extent, constraints. But, that principle of first to market, that principle of agility, and perhaps that's being able to try and say, as a security consultancy and with the security that we want to put in place, that actually we will innovate and work with them in an agile way.
Thanks. And to finish on then, I think I'll bring Ian back here. But obviously the threat landscape's constantly changing. And Ian, you mentioned information sharing in your presentation. Obviously, you're in a great position to see how that's working, both in terms of sectors that are doing it well, and is it the case that financial services tends to be, Champions League places, I suppose, and also which countries and regions are doing that well, and what can we learn from those that are maybe steps ahead?
Thanks, Dan. Information sharing is a really difficult concept, because it stems right from how do we actually release information from that researchers have identified. There was a really good presentation yesterday about testing of airline and aircraft systems, and how do we actually report on those sorts of vulnerabilities and make sure they're available to everybody. These are very safety critical activities that I think are very important. But from a financial services perspective, then I think things like FSISAC and things have been extremely effective. I also think the certs, and a lot of those are based on really good platforms, have had quite a material effect in terms of raising the level of awareness of security related issues. I think the problem that we now have is there is an abundance of information. And if you look at the cert activities and you look at the things that are coming through there, it's really difficult for CISOs, I think, to identify what's actually relevant to them and what they should act on and how quickly. And if you start to get reports of vulnerabilities that have been identified within your environment, and it's coming from a research or it's coming from other sources, how as an organisation can you deal with that? And how should you deal with it, and how should you take corrective action, but also tell the community that that's happened. So I think we've made fantastic inroads in terms of sharing information. I think we're now in a position where, again, we've talked about artificial intelligence. I think there needs to be more extraction tools to make that available, more consumable to the CISOs and others. And I think we have to continue to look at that. I think you mentioned threat. And I think that the emerging threat intelligence industry, and a lot of the speakers are either part of that or an integral part of it. I think that is very much part of the solution. I've been in this industry for a very long time, more than 40 years. And the thing that I've always struggled with is understanding the threat. And I think for the first time ever, we have that opportunity of understanding the things that are occurring and reacting to them much more quickly from a threat perspective. A lot of the things that we've done historically have been looking at reducing vulnerability, but I genuinely think now we have the opportunity to see what's coming over the hill and react much faster. So I think there needs to be a change in terms of how we share that information and the speed to facilitate the opportunity for us to react as an industry to an attack that's across sector or across organisations. So I think we've made really good inroads. I think we need to collaborate, and I think if there is a takeaway message from this, then it is we as countries within Europe need to continue to collaborate. We need to continue to work together. We need to have better metrics, which include things like information sharing, but there are other metrics that we need to put in place to actually see whether or not we're spending money in an appropriate way. And I think we should be doing that at an international level, not purely looking at it from an individual country's perspective. Therefore, I think we should take the very best that we can find, and the presentations today, I think, have been indications of the very best that we can find. And rather than compete, we should be collaborating to make sure we continue to work together in an effective way.
Thanks, Ian, and I certainly couldn't agree more on the international collaboration point, which we see across all different aspects of the sector. Now, this is probably gonna lead to 1 or 2 minutes of overrun, but I'm gonna give each of the panelists an opportunity for a 10-second key takeaway. I'm going to do that in reverse order from what we speak. So I'm sorry, Rachel, I'm going to come to you first. But just a 10-second sentence on what you think the key takeaway from today should be.
Absolutely. I think I would echo the last speaker and Ian's point about collaboration. I can see a lot of scope for collaboration with some of the companies that are on here, and together we're stronger in terms of delivering services and augmenting the strength of our offering.
Andrew?
I think the idea that the threat is met through a multitude of different ways, and the technology that we've heard about being one of them, but also how you implement processes and procedures, how you manage things.
Jamie?
I'm going to echo what other people have said, really. It's the collaboration, it's the technical collaboration between the different vendors today. So there's a couple of people I'll be calling after this, to get to play nicely together, and don't forget about the humans. This is people.
James?
Yeah, collaboration's key. I think tech is key, and cyber will continue to be, but no, don't forget about the people. And cyber is a skills profession, not a knowledge profession. So they need to practice, they need to evidence, and that would be my key takeaway. Thanks.
Peter?
Yeah, I think I think as people have alluded to, there's not one silver bullet to protect against all the threats that are out there. So combining your knowledge and combining your resource with others is the way to go.
Mariana?
A little controversially, I think this challenge is too big for humans alone, and to close many of those gaps that we've discussed in bringing together all of these different technologies, we're outmatched. So I think the time is right to bring some help in the form of artificial intelligence.
And last but not least, Vince.
Yeah, I think I'll just say for financial services, you're in a war that you never wanted to be a part of, a war against these cyber threats. But to echo what everybody said, collaboration, talk to cyber vendors, we'll all talk to each other. And if we approach this as a holistic problem, then we're going to be much better off in future.
Thanks for those. And that's it for today, I'm afraid. So just falls to me to say an enormous thank you to all the panelists for giving up the time this morning to speak to us. I think there's been some exceptional contributions, and we'll certainly make sure that the slides and contact details are circulated post-event. So please do continue the conversations afterwards. It's been a really enjoyable session, and I'd like to thank Manuela and Sophia for putting it together at DIT. I think they're doing a fantastic job. And thanks to all of you for joining as well. So without further ado, I'll end the session there, and have a great day.
Thank you.
So.
Thanks.